Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mr. Productivity Podcast. Hey, hop on over to my website, MrProductivity.com, M-I-S-T-E-R, MrProductivity.com. Dave Noll is returning to the show. He is a prolific TV creator and executive producer known for developing, get this, over 60 series and 3,700 plus episodes, including the Emmy-winning hit Chopped from the Food Network and its international spinoffs. As one half of the successful development team, Keller Noll, Dave has garnered numerous accolades, including 2 Emmy Awards, and a James Beard Award. Dave, welcome back to the show.
This guy sounds great. He sounds fantastic. What a great introduction.
Well, I took all the stuff you sent me and fed it in AI and said, get me something that makes Dave sound real good.
That AI knows what it's doing.
Well, we're not going to talk a lot about what we talked about the first episode, the first time he was on the show, but I will tell you, audience, that my wife and my younger daughter used to watch Chopped like I watched
Hannah. He's talking about Hannah.
Wow.
Hannah's a huge Chopped fan, and here's the thing about Hannah. She's always had great taste. Just from right out of the gate, a crazy smart kid with impeccable taste.
Well, of course, my wife, Michelle, has got impeccable taste as well because she married me.
She's amazing. Great taste in TV, great taste in dudes.
You know, I think your episode was the only episode Hannah ever listened to mine, only because you gave her a shout out. So this will be the second episode she listens to.
Hannah is a huge fan of my work. I am a huge fan of Hannah.
Okay.
So that works out well.
Well, maybe she'll stop listening it when, as soon as you said that, we get into the conversation, she'll probably stop. But hey,
she'll be bored. Hannah's going to be bored. I know her well. She's going to be bored in about 2 minutes.
Okay. So somebody on your team, apparently not you, sent me your book, The Visionary in Charge. And my friend, I got to tell you this. I read this book, every word, and this is easily, and this is not trying to pump your head up of air. I'm just saying one of my top 7 favorite books of all time. I'm not kidding you.
Stop it right now.
I'm not lying. This book, I don't even know where to start with this book, The Visionary in Charge, because as I'm reading this book, I'm like, this is not a Joe Rogan 4-hour podcast. I don't know where to start with this. I mean, because the book is really that good, folks. You've got to pick up this book. I'm not saying, Dave is going to tell you about the book at the end probably, but I'm telling you, you need to go get Visionary in Charge. It is very well written. You get to see behind the curtains of how he came up with all these shows. You see the final product on television. I know, because I know Dave and he was on my show before. It's not that easy. He's got America Says, is another blockbuster hit. But what he doesn't talk about a lot is all the failures, all the no's you heard along the way.
Yeah. It really is. It's a business that is 99%. It's higher, like a 99.5% failure. And you have to just embrace that like a crazy person and do it again and again. But thank you so much just for reading the book, Mark. That's very nice of you. Before I started, I reread all of my favorite business books.
Okay.
So I reread Good to Great. And I reread Bob Iger's book and Jerry Weintraub's amazing book. I reread Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point. And then as I did that, I took all these notes and compiled all these stories and ended up with 7 rules for people who want to create amazing blockbuster ideas, whether it's in TV or whether it's podcasting or whether you're selling software or whatever it is. That was the goal. So for you to say such nice things about the book means a lot. That's unbelievable. It's actually shocking.
Like I said, I'm not making it up. It was really good. I didn't want the book to end. One of the things I don't like about books are just like, here is a bunch of stuff. You shared stories and the knowledge. And I think when you combine those two, it's great. Robin Sharma, one of my other favorite authors, does the same thing. He takes a story, he takes lessons, combines the two. And I think it's a lot easier for us to learn from that.
And that is all thanks to my publisher, Jen, such a wonderful human being and so patient because what I started out doing was along the way in my career, I have learned all these stories. I've worked with some amazing people along the way, and I talk about that in the book. Barry Diller, billionaire legend. I worked with him for many years. But also along the way, I've worked with Tom Cruise and Celine Dion and Adam Sandler. And I had all these stories, and I've studied people like Oprah, Walt Disney. And so I thought basically the book was going to be me combining those stories. And what Jen kept saying is, that's great, but you need personal stories. And she would talk to me and interview me, and all these stories came out, and I started just writing on these colored note cards, here's all the stories. And she kept saying, the reader is going to want more of those. And I was like, but it's Oprah's great. And then they would read Oprah's book. And I would be like, I know, but it all fits together and whatever. So the book started off 80, 90% other people's stories. And it ended up, I don't know, 50-50 or whatever. So yes, you do get amazing stories about Oprah, Will Smith, Celine, Tom Cruise, Barry Diller, etc. But then half of it is my own personal stuff. So again, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I want to start off with the X point. First chapter of the book, the X point. The reason why I want to start there is because we've all accounted the X point. We just didn't call it the X point. So let's define for the listener or the viewer, because this is also a video podcast, what do you mean by the X point?
When I started selling television shows, I would just ask a ton of questions, and I read anything I could about creative business endeavors that succeeded. And what you find is there's a lot of books about Disney. There's a lot of books about Oprah. And then there's other stuff. There's a lot of books about John Lennon and Paul McCartney. There's all of these kind of creative geniuses. Stephen King has an amazing book that was mind-blowing. And so I kept reading about these moments where some sort of insane, mind-blowing genius would happen. My favorite one is Walt on a park bench coming up with Disneyland as he was watching his two daughters play on the merry-go-round in Griffith Park. And I think that resonated with me for so many reasons. One is because I've obviously been there, right? I've been to Disneyland. I've been to Disney World. And so it's not just a movie. You can feel the experience, right? Also, because I have daughters. I have 3 daughters. He had 2. But what fascinated me about all these of insane genius is they all have similarities. And so the reason I call it the X point, and I do not obviously equate creating Chopped with creating Disneyland. Disneyland has made a little bit more money. I say, picture this giant X sitting on the timeline of your life. The reason I call it an X is because there's all these little moments that you don't realize are happening, obviously, that lead to this one kind of brilliant moment where my friend Mike and I, or Walt on a park bench, you create something that changes everything. And then there's all these moments afterwards that come from that moment of brilliance. And so that's why I call it an X point. It's like all these things come to this one point, and then it leads to all this amazing stuff. But really the key is I started reading and asking a lot of questions about all these X points. And the key is X points don't happen when you're angry at your boss, or they don't happen when you're so tired you can't think. It's actually very rare that they happen when you want them to happen. When I sit down at my desk, and this, again, story after story about songwriting or authors coming up with books or entrepreneurs, people like I studied a bunch of the Shark Tank legends about how they came up with their initial products. And so you read about people who came up with products or websites or all these things. If you sit down and say, okay, I'm going to create genius today, it is almost never going to happen. And what I say is you have to be ready. You have to be excited. You have to enjoy what you're doing. You can't be disgruntled. You can't, as I say, you can't be mad at your boss or mad at your husband or whatever the case may be. And that's when, but if you're in a good place and you're ready that day, and then I talk about catching it, right? Like, you can't let it go by. You have to go, wait a second. Wait. Mike and I were on the phone when we created Chopped. He was in Los Angeles, I was in New York. And when it happened, both of us jumped on it. Disney, when he's on that park bench and the X point happens, he jumps on it. He immediately goes, wait a second, this could be legendary. It could be an enormous billion-dollar property. I talk about Merv Griffin coming up with Jeopardy. He's on a plane with his wife and they're just talking. And so you have to be accepting of the X point, and then you have to jump on it when it happens and really embrace it and be all in.
I love how you talked about being ready, because a lot of people, they say, well, I'll be ready in next week, or when my kids go to college, or when I get this new job, or when I learn this new skill. But here's the thing. Life is funny. Life may give you that X point when you don't think you're ready. You may be ready, but you may be reluctant. But here it is. And if you miss it, well, there may be another X point. Maybe there won't be, because there's nothing guaranteed in life.
And I say X points do come, but you don't want to let them pass you by, and you don't want to miss them, because I'm not obviously Mr. Energy every single day. I'm not Mr. Positivity every single day. But the more days that I can be that way, I absolutely embrace it. Reading the book, you'll see I try to point this out. I'm not talking about just people who create TV shows or movies or songwriting or whatever. If you're a school teacher and you're looking to create a way to reach your students that will change the way you teach, or maybe change your whole department even, that's who I'm hopefully writing the book for. It should teach you how to open your mind to moments like that. My favorite responses so far have been people who said, oh my gosh, this did change the way I was thinking. My friend Carney Wilson from Wilson Phillips, she called and she said she had the book for weeks and weeks, and she said, I just can't finish it. And I was like, I laughed because she's extremely funny and lovely. And I laughed and I was like, Carney, I don't think that's a compliment. And she was like, no, I can't finish it because I haven't written a ton of songs lately. Because of the book and everything you're writing about, I keep going to the piano to write songs. And she's, thank you so much, because this has inspired me to write more. And it is hopefully, and you tell me, you read it out of nowhere, hopefully a book of inspiration. The whole goal is to fire people up.
It is. And one of the things I got from the book is, specifically about the X point, is you could be hearing no, 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 no. But once you hit the X point and you start hearing yeses, all of a sudden those no's, even though they're an hour ago, seem like a distant memory, because the X point is so powerful.
And the one thing I talk about a lot in my LinkedIn posts and is you really do have to, if you're going to be in any kind of competitive business, you have to flip the no's into something positive. Mm-hmm. And we get no's all the time, but taking every single win. So if someone turns down a show of ours, which obviously it happens constantly, but in the email, they say, here's what we're really looking for right now. That's a huge win, because now Cleve is the woman I create shows with. I can call Cleve and we can say, oh, ABC, Hulu, Netflix, they're looking for this. Now we know this. Now let's fire some. Is there anything we have? Can we fire something back at them? So you can't sometimes passes are brutal, right? Like we've worked on stuff for years and all of a sudden now people are passing, and sometimes in TV people are not nice. But taking any negative and taking any win out of it is something Cleve and I just do constantly. Just take every possible win.
I think that's so important. And another chapter you talk about the one click away thing. And I think the reason why I resonated with this chapter is I'm a big fan of simplicity. I believe complexity is a gateway to procrastination. And a lot of us are thinking, well, no, I want to go 40 clicks. No, try one click away. Change something small. I just recorded a video this morning for social media. It hasn't posted yet as of the date of this recording, but it was about small hinges swing big doors. I first heard about this in the book from W.
Amazing.
Clement Stone. And that's what your one click is. We're looking for the next big thing, but the X point may be one click away, not a huge click. And I think what I got at one chapter, one word is simplicity.
One of the things, again, you learn if you study anything about movies, film, television, music, etc., the things that pop, and again, entrepreneurs, I put all of them in the same sphere, in the same world. Things that pop are just one click away from other things that are successful. And there's example after example where you can clearly see this happening. And what you just said is absolutely true. It is, people need simplicity. They crave it. They crave things that are new, right? We all wake up every day and we want to hear about the new product, the new burger at McDonald's, the new something that brings something forward, one step forward. Oh, did you hear what that hotel is doing? Oh, did you see what that supermarket is doing? Just something that's new. We all crave something new, but it needs to be so simple, especially now where there's ads on our phone constantly. There's ads on TV constantly. There's billboards. There's all this stuff coming at us. Simple. We love something that's new and something that's crazy easy to understand.
Oh, 100%. And matter of fact, the last Apple keynote with the new Apple Watches and iPhones, I'm an Apple nerd. I walked away from that bored because here's the key. When they start talking about new colors, forget it. One click, you already move the needle. I mean, I don't think a new color is moving it.
No, but you just need the one idea, right? One thing where you're watching and you want to immediately tell other people. This became so clear to me when I was I talk about this in the book, when I was at a dinner party and Game of Thrones had just started out. And if you want to describe Game of Thrones to someone who just landed on this planet, it'd be very hard to do. But Game of Thrones came out in the wave of where Lord of the Rings was gigantic, right? Everybody on the planet basically knew what those Lord of the Rings movies were. Hugely successful. So then a couple of years later, Game of Thrones comes out. And I'm at this dinner party. And I knew about Game of Thrones because I work in the industry and I knew about HBO and blah, 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 blah. And I heard these two people talking. And the woman said, "What are you watching?" And this guy said, "Oh, this is this new show, Game of Thrones." And she said, "Oh, what's that about?" "It's not in the title," right? "Okay. What is this show?" And he said, "Oh, you know what it is? It's Lord of the Rings, but it's on HBO." And you could see her think about it. And then she said, "Wait, so it's Lord of the Rings?" And but there's sex and violence. And she's like, "Sex?" And he's like, "Sex." And she's like, "Violence?" And it's that, there's the example. If it's not exactly that, but it's, are you a fan of Lord of the Rings? But do you want to watch it on HBO? That's exactly what that show is. That's so easy. And it's fun, right? Like, it's fun to say stuff like that. It's fun to be like, "Oh, have you heard about this new show, this new movie, this new product?" And when you're at a dinner party, now that I've brought it up, you'll start to see, oh, that's what people do.
And when people ask me to explain the podcast, the Mr. Productivity podcast, I say, well, it's sort of like a clean version of Joe Rogan without the alleged $100 million Spotify contract.
And it is like, you take something that's a hit and then you do one significant, one actual real click, one something that will, oh, okay, it's Joe Rogan, but it is the clean version. It's the entirely clean. And you get it right away. Oh, I get it. And if you like Joe Rogan, if you like that podcast experience, well, we're going to check out Mr. Productivity. That's the simplicity.
I want you to talk a little bit about America Says, because when I'm reading that part of the book, how it was trains going down the track, chugga, chugga, chugga. All of a sudden it stopped. And I'm like, oh no, oh no. Tell us about that story.
This is such a common thing in TV. And it's so fascinating to write about. And then, as I say, when I talk to entrepreneurs, they'll say, we lived through the exact same thing. We had this show. We originally sold it, and it was a show called Billionaire. And it was all about, the prize was living a piece of the billionaire lifestyle. And we loved the show, and we loved the game, and we loved the title. We pitch it around, and it's bought by the USA Network. They love the title. They love the game. They love everything. And we're thrilled. And they're like, we want to do a pilot and then hopefully go to 10 episodes. And so obviously, this is amazing. So we sell the show Billionaire to the USA Network. And then all of a sudden one day they call and they say, we love the game, because we had gone out to Los Angeles and played the game live with everybody. So they said, we love the game. We just had a meeting. We want to take out everything else. The title, the theme, the prizes, the game board, it's all gone. So can you keep the game and repitch it to us, and then we'll do the pilot? And so there's a moment where you're devastated. Obviously, you've done all this work. We had been working on that for a year plus, pitched it to a number of places. There was all this interest, and then we went with USA, and we're just shell-shocked. As I say in the book, luckily, Cleve and I have a fix for moments like that. She comes to my house and we sit on the porch. If it's nice out, we sit in this room if it's not nice out. But if it's nice out, we sit on the porch. And we just talk about the issue as friends and as people who have a lot of experience. And we talk about every angle and try to come up with a simple fix. We talked all morning and we went back and forth and didn't have a lot of anything that was any good. And then we went to lunch. I say we probably had a drink at lunch just to loosen up. Of course, just one. And I think it was on the way back. We had talked a lot about what USA Network meant. And to us at that point, it meant a big, broad, colorful network that you could watch if you were 12 or if you were 92. They had shows that you could watch if you were from New York or Los Angeles or Kentucky or Ohio or wherever you were from. And so we were looking for things that were big and broad. And one of the words Cleve and I love, and you see it in our titles again and again, is the word America. Because we're always looking for shows that are big and grand and epic. And no matter what, almost every example that's successful, and there are a ton of them, if you put the word America in the title, it's successful and it immediately feels big and grand. So American Idol, America's Got Talent, America's Next Top Model, but even American Horror Story, right? Immediately you're like, this must be good. It's the American Horror Story. And there's so many examples. There was a show called The Americans. Obviously, my favorite, Captain America, right? That just seems so big. And so as we're walking back, Cleve says, what if the theme is America? And we had a different show where the title was America Says. And she said, what if we use the same game, but we call it America Says? Because what you're doing on the show is you're trying to figure out, what did America say? Here's a question we asked America. And I was just like blown away, because I was like, that's so brilliant for the USA Network. Let's call it America Says. And then all of a sudden, we're like, the game board should be in the shape of our country. Yes, people love that. It's amazing. And the whole theme is stars, and it's red, white, and blue. And then we had this game board idea, again, for a totally different show, where instead of putting up the answers in a row, every other thing you watch, the answers are in a row, graphics on a sporting event, they're like this. We're like, what if we use what we'd called the cloud board, where all the answers pop up all over the country and the biggest answers in the center, and it's bigger. And so the whole thing flipped to America Says, new game board, same game, but a whole different theme. And God bless them, they loved it. We called and they said, yes, let's go right to pilot. We did that pilot. They loved the pilot. We got Whoopi Goldberg to be the host, and then they killed the whole show. So there's always then like genius, and then heartbreak, and then brilliance, and then heartbreak. That's TV.
I got two suggestions for you. Okay. North Korea Says and Iran Says. What do you think?
That's their whole goal. With Chopped, we've been able to do Chopped Canada, Chopped South Africa, Chopped Dubai, Chopped Junior, Chopped Champions, etc. America says we have not been able to do, France says, Italy says, Japan says, yet. We're trying. It's hard, but that is the goal. I don't know about Iran because I usually have to go to these countries, Mark. And
I think chopped North Korea and chopped Iran would have a totally different connotation.
Canada says is much easier for me. And I'm in. Australia, that's even a little too far.
Well, what about New Zealand? I have Australian Siri.
I would go.
I have Australian Siri on my phone. I want Tim Cook, if you happen to listen to the show, I want a Kiwi Siri, okay? I just love
There's one. I have New Zealand Siri.
No, you don't. That's
the one I chose. It drives my wife crazy.
No, they don't have.
My kids love it.
Are you kidding me? No, they don't. You lie.
It's gonna play it when we're done. I'm gonna play it.
Santa watches the show, so you gotta be careful there, Dave. All right, let's talk about something that's really controversial. You say, I'm gonna read this. Rule number 2: don't ever think big. When I read that chapter, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I get the X point. All right. What, I got a dream small? No, that's not what you're talking about, are you, Dave?
This is something that we learned the hard way from the great Barry Diller. So Barry, or as I call him, Mr. Diller, or Barry Rutherford Lawrence Diller III, Mr. Diller. He started the Fox network. He greenlit The Simpsons, Married with Children, Beverly Hills 90210, all that stuff. He at one point ran Paramount and greenlit like Beverly Hills Cop and just a string of the greatest movies of all time. The guy is a genius. Now he runs IAC. It's a whole bunch of websites, and he's a multi-billionaire. So we were able to work with him and create shows for his New York-based production company and sell those shows. And what I like to say, and it's totally true, is of the 20 smartest things I've ever learned in TV, I've ever heard come from someone's mouth, he probably said 15 of them, maybe 18. That's how smart this guy is. So we had been working for him for all of 4 months, and this never happens. What happened was we had this crazy idea for a show. We thought it was great, but it was very focused on a talent. So we reached out to the talent. The talent said yes almost immediately. It was just this bit of luck. He was available, etc. And then we knew we had a target net buyer, a target network. And we went on 2 pitches, a practice pitch, and then we went to that network. What happens in TV is usually they give you a development deal for a show or a pilot. In this particular case, they were so excited that they went right to 10 episodes.
Wow.
So we thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And as I say in the book, at that point, we were big thinkers. We thought this was big. We have a show. I think the budget was like $800,000 an episode, or $600,000 an episode, whatever it was. And it was 10 episodes. So that's in the millions of dollars. We'd only been there for 4 months. It was going right to series. We're like, we are legendary big thinkers. This is crazy how great we are. We are so talented. And what happened was once a month, I would go in and present, here's what we're doing. And so that day, and this is all 100% sadly very true, I like wore my nicest clothes and my wife was like, whoa, you're doing something today. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to go impress the great Barry Diller. I was like so proud of myself. And Diller liked old school packets. So you'd print all these graphs and charts out in these packets with the binder clip. And so we had the most beautiful presentation for this. I was going to go in and tell him about this show, right? And here's how successful we are, and here's how we came up with it, and here's the idea, and here's the financials for season 1 and 2, and the projections for season 3 and beyond. And so I was on top of the world, and Cleve was like, good luck. We high-fived, we probably hugged. We were so excited. So I go in, my turn to talk, and I crushed the presentation. As I say, big thinker, on top of the world. I'm a king, page after page. I'm witty. I'm giving the numbers. He's not impressed at all, but whatever. He's Barry Diller. He's a billionaire. Of course he's not impressed. Whatever. I am crushing it in this room full of scary legal people and money people. And I finish with a flair. I'm amazing. And he says, why are we doing this again? And I did exactly what you just did. I laughed because I was like, obviously he's joking. I'm a king. I'm a big thinker. Sense of panic, but I laughed. And then I repeated a couple of key points. And then he put the binder clip back on and slid it across the table. And I'm not going to say the word he used because, as discussed, this is a clean podcast. But he said, it's an effing lemonade stand. And the life was sucked out of me. And it was terrible. Wow. And in the next 2 minutes, 3 minutes, he dissected the whole thing. He basically said, look, this is all dependent on your talent. You're going to do this deal. They basically own everything. We're never going to be able to spin this show off into various directions. There's never going to be a chopped Canada, chopped South. I don't think this person's easy to work with. I don't think this buyer is easy to work with. I don't think this is going to go beyond season 3. But let's say it's 4 seasons. I'll give you that. Here's how much money you'd make in the best scenario. And he added it all up and he's like, $7 million. It's a lemonade stand. And I was just absolutely devastated. And what that taught us, I went back up. We had this enormous development board with 80, 90 ideas on it. And I basically said to Cleve, he only wants gigantic shows. And he did. And he said, look, you think you were hired to get any show on the air. That's not why you were hired. He's like, Wheel of Fortune. Look at the 10 biggest money-making series ever in the world. So you look those up and you think it's Seinfeld, which is huge, and Law and Order, which is huge. But the biggest money-making shows are Wheel of Fortune, Family Feud, American Idol, America's Got Talent, all over these are shows that are all over the world and they are billion-dollar properties. There's even ones that didn't do well here that are still billion-dollar properties because they're in every other place around the world. Like Money Drop was on here, like 6 episodes. There's a show called Come Dine With Me. The biggest money-making show for 4 years running globally was this show called Come Dine With Me. We've never heard of it in America, but it was on every other major country 5 nights a week. Huge money-making enterprise. And so Cleve and I talked about it. What we realized was it takes just as much work for you to come up and pitch a lemonade stand show as it does if you pitch me the next Idol, the next Wheel of Fortune. And he was like, or come up with the next Law and Order. I don't care what you do. Come up with the next Seinfeld if you can. But just don't pitch me anything without a clear, obvious path to over $100 million globally. And so when I say don't think big, it's because compared to people like Diller, we thought that was the biggest show we had ever created with the most success ever. And you're in this bubble of your own experience and your own expertise. He pierced the bubble and he said, what I want you to do is study what is the most successful in your genre. And so we looked at all of television and these are the most successful shows. He's like, yeah, you can create that show. And so if you look at Chopped, America Says, we have a brand new show called Flipside on CBS. The goal with all of these shows isn't just $2 million or $10 million or whatever. The goal is there's a version in every country around the world and it's hundreds of millions. It's hard to do.
I get that from reading the book. I can't help but bringing up my favorite sport and my favorite team. I love European football. I'm a big Man City fan. And when I was reading this book, I was thinking about the Man City coach, Pep Guardiola. This guy doesn't coach per play. He's got the vision. We want to win the title. We want to win the Champions League. We want to win the FA Cup. We want to win the EFL Cup. And I think this is why Man City doesn't even want him to leave. His contract is up at the end of the season. They're going to give him $100 million war chest for the January transfer window because it's not just like he always wins. He's a visionary. He sees what the end goal is, and he knows how he's got to move the chess piece around. So anybody who's going to read your book and think it only has to do with TV shows, I'm a solopreneur. It applies to me. It applies to sports. It applies if you are a farmer. It applies to everyone, because if you want to crack the code on being successful in life, however you define success, you have to be a visionary. Steve Jobs, for example, again, I'm an Apple fanboy. He built up Apple. They fired him. And it took me years to find out, how do you get fired from your own company? But when he came back, he looked at their 850 products. He goes, what are you doing? Because he had a vision. We offer very few pieces of product, and that's all we do. And so he cannibalized like 80% because he wanted to keep it simple, because he was a visionary. Jeff Bezos, another visionary. So I want people to understand that this book is not just for people like Dave who are creating shows. It's for any industry.
And that's the perfect example. What Diller did in that one meeting, in just a couple of sentences, look at what I immediately went up. As I said, we had this huge board with 80 or 90 things. And I said to Cleve, he only wants shows with a clear, obvious path to over $100 million. And we started crossing shows off, and we ended up with 8 shows. That was heartbreaking. And that day we were shocked. All this work, months and months of work, because we started creating before we got there. This was like a year's worth of work just down the tubes. And it took us a couple days to realize what had really happened, which was we went from 92 shows that the average was lemonade stand money down to 8 shows that were potentially enormous. And now there's these 82 or whatever it is shows that are gone. You don't have to worry about those anymore. The positive, obviously, is clearing your mind to just the ultimate success. And that has been the reason why, before we started working with Diller, Cleve and I had sold a handful of shows. We'd gotten, 50 episodes on the air or whatever. Now we've sold over 200 shows. We've gotten over 60 of them on the air. We're close to now 4,000 episodes. That's all because of this guy. It's because we listened to this guy who's a genius.
What I want people not to miss is when you got that devastating phone call about America Says. Yeah, you got punched in the face by Mike Tyson, but you didn't do what a lot of people would do. Oh, it's not meant to be. You didn't go into Eeyore mode. I love Winnie the Pooh. You got with Cleve and say, okay, God, this sucks. You probably use some other more colorful language. But then you figured out, okay, how do we go from this point, this down point? How do we move on? A lot of people got punched in the face. Well, it wasn't meant for me. But you didn't do that. And I want people to understand that from the book and from our conversation today, that you had 60 shows that were on the air, 4,000 episodes, but think of the thousands that didn't make it. And I want people to understand that this is how life happens.
And that's the genius of my publisher. I thought people wanted to hear stories about famous people. And then she kept saying, no, stories about you. And I thought they only wanted to hear positive stories. So I packed the book with positivity. And I was like, that's what this... And she eventually read a version. And she was like, in talking to you, you get turned down so much. There's so much disappointment. There's so much people punching you in the face. She's like, that you've said to me 99.67% of your job is just getting turned down. You have to put the low points in. And I said, people don't want to read about the low points. And she's, I need you right now to go list the lowest points. And I'll tell you, she's a paragraph. And then I'll tell you which of these stories to put in the book. And I wrote, say 5 of them. And she made me put all of them in the book. People don't just want to hear about you creating Chopped. They really want to hear about when Food Network passes on the pilot. It's done. It's killed. And then you and the showrunner, Linda Lee, go back and resuscitate that show. And now it's 1,000 episode success.
Wow.
They want to hear the story of America Says, where you and Cleve worked for years on this show. And then all of a sudden, USA Network kills all of it except for the game. And you have to reinvent the whole thing. And then they turn it down dead. It's gone. And Cleve and Dave figure out a way to pitch Game Show Network, and they order in a matter of hours from the pitch to the order the next day, 65 episodes. It was mind blowing. We went from a zero, like it was dead. And then we go in, we figured out a way to pitch a very different version to Game Show Network. They love it. And the next day I'm on a plane flying back. And I read about this in the book. It was unbelievable. I fly into Newark. I turn my phone on like people do. And it was just bing, bing, text after text, email after email, because everyone was so shocked. And I thought something had gone terribly wrong. I was like, I never get this many messages unless something has been destroyed. But it was the opposite. Game Show Network, they met about the show that afternoon. They met about the show in the morning with legal, and they ordered 65 episodes. And it's all about, if there's something that can be landmark, it can be amazing. It can be that $100 million idea. You got to find a way to stick with that. You have to find a way to stick with it. And it's Cleve and I, it happens time and time again where we resuscitate these things. And that's where the ultimate success comes from.
Okay, the final thing I want to talk to you about, because you've got 7 rules. I don't want to give away the farm on the show. Just want to pique people's interest.
We could just read from the book. We'll just read it.
Okay. Introduction, the South of France. Oh, perfect. No, just kidding.
Isn't that great, though? Start a book in the South of France, I always say.
You know, I'll be honest with you, Dave. When I started reading this, the first chapter, the South of France, a perfect, bright blue sky. You're on a yacht. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I know, Dave. Is he going to like say, nah, I'm better than you? But that's just the introduction. As you start reading, you're like, oh, okay. So
I try to pull the rug out from under myself, basically.
And me too, apparently. So,
yeah.
So the final thing I want to talk to you about is persistence. I believe persistence is power. And I grew up in the 80s. Rick Astley, never going to give up. You know, you can't give up. And like we just finished talking about, life is going to happen. You're going to hear no. That client you thought you got is not going to happen. That job you thought you were perfect for wasn't going to happen. And what most people do, they go boo-hoo, boo-hoo. And then okay, I'm not going to try anymore because what's the point? But the people who are successful, and you could look at anyone who's successful in the world, they persisted. I mean, Amazon started selling just books. That's it.
Amazing.
Then they went into VHS tapes. Now they sell everything except for human organs, known because it's illegal. But my point is, he didn't give up. And if you want to succeed in this life, again, however you define success, you can't ever give up.
What Cleve and I have found, and we did not set out to do this, but what we found is it's very easy to say, never give up, right? Just never give up. But what you need to do, like Cleve and I have now been selling shows together for 20 years, you need to put systems in place, to put games, mindsets, whatever it is, so you can't give up. I didn't even realize we had done it until I started writing the book. And the readers, the people that were reading it, they would love these stories of how Cleve and I had come up with these ways to mentally get over these hurdles, to mentally break through these walls. And so I write about 3 or 4 of them in the book. The biggest one is ages ago, we came up with our own equation. I don't even know how it happened or why it happened. We started going to other production companies, other companies that were pitching shows, and network executives. And we started asking, out of how many pitches does it take to get to one sale? The pitches have to be great. They have to be amazing. But how many amazing 5-star pitches do you need before you get one sale? In Brandon Tartikoff's book, so Brandon ran NBC in the 80s. He greenlit some of the greatest television shows in history. He might still be the greatest TV executive that ever lived. He said, even if you're pitching Seinfeld, Survivor, Friends, whatever it is, Game of Thrones, you're going to have to pitch it 30 times because the other 29 times, people won't understand what you're pitching. they won't have the money. You're pitching a show that costs $1 million an episode, and they just don't have the budget right then. And they can't tell you that because that means they don't have a job. So they don't tell you, but they have to pass. And so you're going to have to pitch 30 times before a sale, 5-star pitches. So I wrote that number down. Then we went to these production companies and said, out of every deal that you get, how many deals do you need to get an actual show on the air? And the answer was 1 out of 4. It still is. It's crazy. 1 out of 4 deals or so leads to an actual series. And then we went to all these network executives and said, of every series, how many series do you need for a hit? And people came back with, on our network, it's like 1 out of 5. On ours, but the average of all those answers, and a lot of people said this number was 8. Out of every 8 shows, 1 is a hit. And so on this big giant board in the air, I wrote 30 times 4 times 8. And I think it's 960. I'm blanking on the number right now. I think it's 960. And so it's a shocking number, right? Because it essentially means we're going to have to pitch 959 times. And these are 5-star pitches to get 1 hit show. And that is daunting. But what it means on a day-to-day basis is every time someone turns us down, we got 2 passes today, just today, 2 different times that networks said we're passing on your show, 2 of them today. And as I say, sometimes these passes are mean, sometimes they're condescending, sometimes or whatever. But in my brain, I go, that's 2 more steps towards 960. And so if you think of it that way, and you can do 150 pitches a year, you do the math. Everything is a step forward. So you're not getting knocked back. So often I talk to people and they'll say, I tried to pitch a show and it didn't work. And I felt terrible. I went to 4 places. It makes me laugh every time. Not at them. I'm not laughing at them. As later that day, they'll say like, I pitched 4 times and then I gave up. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, if I gave up after 4 passes, I would never get a show. It's crazy. So what it does is you constantly feel like you're moving forward. We've created these ways to constantly cheer ourselves up.
Well, first of all, I want to make sure you understand that there is never math involved on the show. I promise that to my list. They don't have to do math.
I needed a calculator at the time. I know that. It was like 30 times 4 times. I was like, someone's going to have to help me. I need technology. This number is way too high.
I read a book, The $1 Million Weekend by Noah Kagan. And one of the things he talks about in that book is be a collector of no's, which is basically what you just said.
That's it.
Because every no gets you closer to yes.
100%. And that's even when shows fail. And obviously that's the biggest gut punch. When you work so hard on a show and it only makes it 1 season or 2 seasons, you have to think, well, I need 8 of those to get a hit. So whatever, that was too bad. I'll learn something and we'll move forward and I'll get 7 more. And then there's going to be another giant hit.
I think Noah talks about in his book where he says every time someone tells him no, he gets happy because he's
me too. There are some, as I say, there are some days that are you're just like, terrible. Cleve and I just have this agreement. There's 2 of us. If you're in that place where it's 10:30 in the morning or it's 1 o'clock and someone passes and you're on the phone with them and it's mean and it's unexpected or whatever it is, and you're just devastated, just stop. Immediately stop. It's not going to happen. You can't come back from that sometimes. And so I'll call Cleve and I'll just be like, hey, I'll talk to you tomorrow. But the next day, that's all we give ourselves. We give ourselves vacations. But when you're in the middle of an actual work week, all you get is the rest of that day. And the rest of that day, what I usually do is read a book, get just something to get your head out of it, watch a movie that night, have a nice dinner with your family, and then come back at it the next day as hard as you can come every other day. It's over. And this is even, as I say, when someone's passed on a series and we worked crazy hard on one show to get a season 3 and it was on the bubble and they asked us for all this stuff and we worked for months and I did most of the heavy lifting on this particular show. And they reached out with an email, said, we really want to talk. And it was a very positive email. And I was like, we've got it. This is a lock. We're in season 3. And then right away on the phone, after pleasantries, they dropped the bomb and they were like, look, we're not moving ahead. And it was devastating. So even that level of devastation, say that happened at noon that day. I remember almost exactly. I think it was a noon meeting. So it's like 12:20 at this point, 12:40. I called Cleve and I was like, look, I'm out for the rest of the day. She understands. She does the same thing with me. We understand. But the next day at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, when we're having our first call of the day, you're over with that. And now you're on to, who cares? We need 960. Let's go.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you were growing up, single digits, double digits, in high school, what did you want to be? What was your dream? I wanted to be a firefighter because my dad was a firefighter. What did you want to be?
It's crazy because if you would have asked me, I would have said, I don't know. I have no idea. I literally had no idea. There was a point junior year of high school where my English teacher was talking about different majors or whatever it was. And he said, there's a thing called communications, but where you can study TV and film. And I literally thought he was kidding. I remember the moment I was there with my friend Garrett. And I said, that's crazy. I said, no one's going to believe that. And he's like, no, it's true. And I said, no, it's not. And he said, why don't you think it's true? Why do you think I'm lying? And I was like, because if you could study TV in college, why would anyone study anything else? It doesn't make any sense. And he went and got these brochures and he's, look, it's called communications. And it was only that moment where I was like, I felt like I was getting away with something. Like you can study this stuff. It was years later. This is crazy because I write about in the book, if you're lost, if you're ever having one of these moments where you're just lost and you don't know what to do next, go back to 10-year-old Dave I talk about, or 11-year-old Dave. Because I know people say that, but what was crazy was years later, my mom sent me this folder. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. And I open it up and I'm like, what is this? And it was all these papers that I had collected that she had kept in a folder. I had no recollection that I did this, or I just didn't remember. When the new fall schedule came out, I had programmed my own grid for how I would program these shows.
Wow.
And then week after week on Wednesdays, the purple section of the USA Today, which if you're younger than, 30, it was a newspaper. Those are things we used to read to get the news. The purple section of the USA Today listed the top shows of the week. And so I would chart out how shows were doing and who had risen over the course of the season. And I just did that for fun. I did not think it would lead to anything. And she wrote a little note that was like, you've always been a TV executive. You just didn't know it. And I was like, that's insane. Get yourself back in that headspace. Listen to the music that you used to listen to. Sit there, read a book that you read back then, and try that. When anybody's lost, I say that's what you got to do. Go back there because that will lead the way.
My wife and I are going through watching the Bourne movies. So we just finished the first 3. And there's a scene.
Doug Liman, great director. That first one is unbelievable.
There's that scene where he's driving the car, reading a paper map. 2002. There was no Apple or Google Maps back then.
It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem that long ago. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. The Bourne Identity came out in 2002, 22 years ago. And my wife and I had a laugh because when in the fight scene, it's got the overdubbed punchings. It's so funny, so cheesy. I'm like, I still love the movie, though. It's a great movie. I got all the movies. So, Dave, this has been a lot of fun. I mean, good luck, AI. Good luck trying to figure out a title for this episode because you were awesome on this show. So where do you want people to do? Where do you want to send people who want to know more about you?
If you want to know more about me, connect with me on LinkedIn. When I'm in a good headspace, I post 3 times a week, 5 times a week, whatever I'm thinking, whatever I've learned. And if you're interested in the book, go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble. My mom just told me she just bought 7 copies from Walmart.com. So that's nice of her. I don't understand why she did that. I could have given her copies. But anyway, she just bought 7 copies from Walmart, Target, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And definitely then connect with me on LinkedIn and tell me what you thought. If you loved it, that's amazing. Or if you hated it, I think that's also funny sometimes when people send those types of messages. Very rare, but I have gotten
Well,
them.
I will tell you, I get a lot of books as a podcaster, and the books that are so-so, I will never BS the people. I'm like, I liked your book. But yours, I'm honestly saying, it is a phenomenal book. It is in my top 7.
I'm so glad you had a good time and you learned. That's amazing.
And if you're watching this on video, here's the book. Vanna White impersonate. If you're on audio, you're missing it. I'm doing video podcast now. It's on Spotify and YouTube. But if you just like audio podcast, you're missing it. You're going to miss the handsome Dave Noll and his fly haircut. I mean, you're missing all that if you're listening on audio.
Thank you so much, though. This was great. It's always good to talk to you. It's inspiring to me. So thank you very much.
Well, it's a pleasure. And after you go buy his book and go to his website and go connect him on LinkedIn, don't forget to go to MrProductivity.com, MISTER, MrProductivity.com. I really appreciate you watching or listening. I'll be back real soon with a new episode. Until then, don't forget, be productive and be positive.